All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'll call this planning session / meeting to order. We are on Zoom, so people could be logging in to watch. Let us know if there's anybody participating, okay, so that we can loop them in. So I will go ahead and turn the floor over to you. And we'll let you drive.
Thank you. Thanks again, you guys, for having me back. I apologize, Chris couldn't make it today. He has a schedule conflict, so it'll be just me. But from this point forward, you'll be seeing one or both of us, just kind of depending on how things shake out. As you guys recall, last time we met, we did, I guess that was kind of a hybrid discussion here where you guys, Chris and I listened into your goal setting for this group. And then we also kind of talked about where we're at with the strategic planning process, where the survey results came in at and all that good stuff. Today's discussion, I'm planning honestly to just keep it pretty informal and pretty fluid. If anyone has any questions or comments, of course, feel free to stop me. I don't really have a formal presentation plan per se. So I'm kind of planning this to be more of like a, I don't know, focus group, kind of small group discussion sort of thing where we can just kind of brainstorm ideas and kind of get creative juices going and stuff like that. Just for your guys' knowledge, we did have our first workshop with the Planning Commission, and that was on March 7th. And then now we have you guys, we're working with Township staff to pin down a date for Township Board and other Township staff. And then we have our business leaders list, which I've been provided recently. So then we'll work on getting that on the books as well. And then following that, we have, as we mentioned, several focus groups that will be, all the public is invited to these, and these have been advertised, and that's where you're going to see those programs are on the postcard that went out, and then they're also advertised on the project website. As far as next steps and kind of how this is all going to start looking, so essentially, and just kind of, to reiterate our brief discussion on our project process last time. So we're going to have all of our remaining workshops, then we're going to have our several focus groups, and then from that point, we're going to take all of our information from the survey, focus groups, workshops, and calibrate that into our overarching goals and objectives for each group. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the plan from there and kind of branch out which each organization we kind of see how that's going or where that will be going within the next 1 to 5 years, or perhaps even further than that. So that's kind of where we see this sort of landing. Overall, I'm anticipating that this project will be pretty close to being complete, this summer, early fallish, kind of depending on how these dates work out, with different breaks coming up and all that good stuff. So we're getting there. It's just kind of making sure that, all the moving parts are put in place. So, and then if you guys are interested too, I wanted to let you guys know some key highlights that came out from our Planning Commission workshop. One of which the top priority and goal that they have identified as a group is additional training opportunities, whether if that be for planning and zoning purposes or growth management purposes, preservation. So that's something that Chris and I will definitely look into for the final product for the strategic plan, providing where can those training opportunities come up, things like that. How can we help with training opportunities, or how can we help you, things like that. Another thing that the group identified is zoning ordinance changes and updates, especially to reflect changing times due to COVID, changing trends in how we shop, how we dine, how we work. So a lot of those things will kind of come into play and are really important to take a look at in the near term. And then amongst other things too. So relating to preservation, growth management, allocating residential and commercial industrial growth into appropriate areas. How can we redevelop or utilize underutilized commercial spaces, things like that. So that'll be a very exciting piece as it kind of shakes out as we continue working with that group. All right, so the first exercise that I have planned or we have planned, is, and I'm not sure if you guys got this sheet with your packet. Oh, you did?
They did,
Okay.
yeah. I brought just a couple extras if somebody needs one, but.
Okay.
You need one?
Well, I also printed out some. too.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
So you don't have to get up. You're beaten to it. So this is a repeat of the exercise that we did with the planning commission, and likely what we will continue to do with other township organizations that we meet with. I want you guys to just take a couple minutes, 5, 10, whatever, how long it ever takes anybody, to write down what you think the DDA's top 3 priorities should be in the near term. The top 3 priorities that should be included on the strategic plan within 5 years, whether that be creating a village or business attraction or retention, or I don't know, social zones or outdoor dining, stuff like that. So if you guys want to just, I'll give you, 5 to 10 minutes. This isn't a test, so
If you have an extra one of those,
Oh, yeah.
I will take it.
Are you gonna want us to hand these back in, or are we just going to write it down and then share? Because I have mine electronic.
We can just talk about them, I think, because I have my laptop here that I was just gonna write notes in real time to
All right,
do that
that
concise
works
list,
then.
which I will plug in right now. Don't feel like if you can't come up with 3 that you're gonna fail or something. It's no big deal. This would normally be the time that I was going through the presentation, but since you guys already got that, that's why you're having this like dull silence, so apologize.
Never apologize for silence.
Is there anyone that's still working on theirs? Cool. Okay, so then if you, I'm thinking that maybe we could just do like a round robin, maybe from this way, that way, and then I'll record what you guys wrote down, and then we'll kind of see, you know, where these align, who has the same priorities, and then we'll kind of figure out what the top three are amongst the group.
All eyes are on me. That means I gotta start.
If you're
Someone
okay
has
with
to go
starting.
first, right? All right, so I put as my number one priority, and I really leverage this from the survey, is reduce the speed, improve safety of pedestrians, and create a more welcoming corridor in the village area, meaning I'm just specifically targeting the traffic. And it's from specifically Cascade Road, Thorncrest Drive to, I think, Greenleaf or what have you drive. It just basically takes you from right before the bridge, and then it gets you just up to almost the vet establishment. So just the slow traffic down and to prepare things for development of gathering spaces and more of a downtown village feel. What I put kind of in the middle, since this is over the next 5 years, is also thinking the longevity of the DDA and for us to continue to thrive and accomplish our objectives. I said to work with the Grand Rapids or Gerald R. Ford Airport to attract a high quality corporation to utilize the land that is vacant. They have a major project going on where I think they're moving the air traffic control tower to help further aid the development of that vacant space. It's not like it isn't where we're taking away the natural beauty, because it is all flat and vacant land. But this will raise more tax revenue, support existing hotels, restaurants, and attract high quality businesses to the community by having a strong corporation utilizing, or corporations utilizing that. So that's filling in future success for us. And the third priority I have is create multiple gathering places with focused goals and objectives. And what I mean by that is it's a succinct strategy of there's an objective for this gathering and social area, and each one has a specific need in how they relate to each other as well. These areas should help foster community engagement, meeting, and attract businesses and people to the area and township. So those are the three I've got.
That's great. Thank you.
If you want this after I'm done, I can just, or are
Sure.
you taking?
I'll
it?
collect them
Okay.
just
All
to
right.
be, so I have everything.
So, and I'm not sure, so I also have something about traffic safety and control and because they play off each other so much, I don't know which one is ranked 1 or 2, but
Mhm.
so developing a plan for the downtown village project. So I didn't really focus on projects that support the township's strategic plan, identifying projects in short, mid, and long term.
Mhm.
Because I think there's a lot of things that we can do in all of those categories. And just because of the complexity of some projects, they will take longer. And as part of that, creating a charter for for an architecture and design review committee that can be engaged on an ongoing and consistent basis for any of those projects, so that we have some consistency from sort of start to finish. And build and feed a consistent communication channel to township residents so that they know what we're doing and how we're doing it and how much it's costing and things like that. So that's all kind of all part and parcel of that first thing. And then also develop a plan kind of in those same timeframes, 1, 3, 5, and there could be projects that go longer with the road commission, in agreement with the road commission for updates on roads and streetscape that's integral to that downtown village project implementation, but also identifying areas outside of the village that need to be updated to satisfy safety and security. And then third is develop and implement a DDA strategic plan that's in collaboration with other township departments, like planning, that follows that short, mid, and long-term outlook, but also implement a broad approach so that we know that we have a boundary, right, of what we, can control financing or funding for. But how do we be collaborative so that the projects that reside outside of that we're connected with the DDA projects and those that are going on outside, that are outside of our realm of control from a funding standpoint.
Cool, thank you.
All right, short and sweet. My first priority is gathering space. Either something new, something that we've currently got that we can maximize, or we can reconfigure. Secondly is, again, with the slowing of the traffic as a concern. And then third, and it kind of tied into what I guess the Planning Commission even had too, assisting with filling the vacancies of some of the property. And it kind of bounces back to what Scott said too, in the sense that if we can fill these vacancies, it's going to increase that value of that property, which again continues to fund the DDA to continue to do more projects in the future. So it's if you want to say a self-serving, self-worth kind of activity, but it also I think will help the overall community.
Yep. Thank you.
Mine are very reflective of what you've heard already here. And I actually have 4, because I think that the goal of strategic planning is kind of an overarching area of importance. I like that the DDA, I like the thought that the DDA take its own next step in doing its own strategic plan so that we can be sure that we're aligned with everything else. So I've kind of got that off to the side, but
Okay.
my first priority was to update the complete streets plan to work toward traffic calming. Priority 2 was to ensure the continued economic viability of businesses in the DDA and to bring new businesses to the district. And I did these as goals as opposed to specific projects, but some of those have already been mentioned. And the third priority is to implement community placemaking initiatives to make Cascade a recreation destination, whether that be through the community gathering space, which I agree is, I think a great project, or, sports fields or any of those types of things that will bring people to the area for a recreational activity, and then they will enjoy the restaurants, the businesses that we have in the area by virtue of being here.
My number 1 was creating a downtown village, defining an area to call downtown. I like the idea of that, getting an architect involved. I think that's really smart, to have someone draw it, their vision. And number 2 is bringing new businesses to the area, maybe by providing tax incentives and possibly support from private donors. And then number 3 was creating a safe walking bike community, reducing speed on Cascade Road, lighting, sidewalks.
Thank you.
Totally agree with like the planning, that part, with short, long-term goals. And then part of that, I guess, would also like to see that with a focus on kind of long-term smart growth that would preserve or even enhance kind of the quaint residential feel of certain areas of Cascade. Like we definitely already, I'm thinking more like Cascade Road and 28th Street, like kind of, there's going to be a pressure for growth, but I think kind of maintaining a more of a residential feel in certain areas and preserving that so that it doesn't just keep coming east on 28th Street. And then I guess I would say town square gathering space, if it were up to me, which I know it's tricky and harder, but it would be a public-private, it would require professional help, but a redevelopment of the Dollar Tree Chowhound area.
Okay.
Where the township can do incentives or maybe purchase it properties, sell it back different ways. But a redevelopment of that space that kind of combines with once Tuffy's out, like a walkable village area.
Yep.
Is that too big?
No.
Too generic? I would also plant a lot of trees, I think, around Cascade. I'm not saying that's, well, that's what happened, but I think more trees, more greenery, green space.
Controlled development.
Controlled development. Because part of what makes Cascade a valuable place to live, I think, is this kind of residential, green, rolling hills, river, that kind of stuff. And I think to maintain property value, you want to, it's good for everybody. But we still get to take advantage of the skimming the cream off the top of a really big business district. You guys want to hear a little bit of good news?
Yeah.
That's sort of related.
Always.
So one, this is down the road, but you know, how parks, rec, that kind of stuff, a lot of lack of playing fields maybe in Cascade. So the airport has long-term leases available. This is not off the ground yet, but one possibility is long-term leases and the township can help partner with fields and depending on how far it goes, then that brings in tournaments and all the different stuff, hotels, restaurants.
Oh, it's great.
36th Street. Did we already go over this before?
You brought it up a couple of meetings.
Yeah.
Sorry, I repeat myself and then I forget
No,
that
no, no,
I sound like my mom.
That was early days,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different possibilities at the airport, but it would kind of be a great thing with long-term use, already have, the hotels, that kind of stuff. And then I met with the manager of the library here. And they have they don't have the full funding for the entire plan, but they have, the Friends of the Library has a really nice plan for the outdoor space. It would be kind of like the children's garden. I didn't see all the plans that the DDA has looked into, but basically on a little different scale, they have a lot of funding for it.
Yeah.
That would make it, did yours know that? I didn't.
Well, that
realize
was
it
that was part of the community gathering space plan.
was the Friends of the Library involved in that?
Yes.
Sorry, then never mind.
Just,
Looking pretty out of touch.
Sorry.
But they're ready to go and it was really, it was a nice.
Sorry, if I could interrupt. What Grace is talking about though, they updated and they've redesigned and kind of redeveloped. So something a
cool.
little different than what you guys have seen in the past. Yeah.
And they would be covering it, which is nice. At least a large chunk of it.
That's great.
So I think that even though we did hear similar themes multiple times, that's a good thing, right? Because it seems that you guys have a general idea of where you would like to be going, what you would like to be doing. And then it's just kind of at this point, solidifying that and then fleshing it out of what does that look like. So if I could repeat back to you a concise 4 overall priorities that I heard through this exercise. Number 1 being.
Sorry to interrupt. Did Sandra want to add in her
Oh,
2
I'm so
cents
sorry.
too, to kind of be the anchor of the race?
I had a couple of the same community spaces and then underneath that, walkability and safety throughout the district. Riverfront redevelopment and business retention and attraction.
Okay,
Can I ask a question before you start, Danielle?
sure.
For the members here that have been doing this for a lot longer than I have. Has the DDA had any programs that sort of outreach programs for attracting new businesses? You know, has there been any like media, PR, anything like that? I don't remember anything like it.
I don't think anything to grab new business in,
Okay.
but we've done some marketing as far as for existing business,
Okay,
but nothing to
Okay.
really
okay.
attract. And there was a time that when, who was it, Trader Joe's? Trader Joe's was looking around that
Yeah,
you're trying to, have them take that in there, but
yes.
Is there a Whole Foods initiative too that I heard rumblings about?
was it
Or
more
was
Trader
that
Joe's than
Trader
Whole
Joe's?
It
Foods?
was more
Yeah,
Trader Joe's, yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
So is that in sort of collaboration with the planning department? Or, no?
So certainly we work, hand in hand quite often, but we had a group meeting with a couple commercial realtors right about that time when Trader Joe's was talking.
The
just to-
DDA did.
The DDA, the Planning Commission, Township Board.
Okay, so it was a joint.
It was a joint,
Okay,
yeah, meeting with.
all right.
Just one to talk to them about how do businesses search, what are they looking for? What are some of their priorities? Just so we could get a better understanding of that as well.
Yeah.
So,
I know there's an online resource too that I may have to dig up, but I can share it with Sandra that basically has like a whole list of a bunch of different companies and what they typically look for when they go into a community. So you can like specifically do like outreach and advocate to them of like, oh, well, we meet your criteria that you guys have per your website, stuff like that. So I'd be happy to share that resource too. I just have to dig through my email to find it. So to repeat back to you kind of what I've heard throughout this exercise, number one, priority I have road design, streetscapes, road speeds and safety. Of course, this is a big one, especially when you're trying to create a downtown that, making sure that people feel comfortable, safe, sidewalks, crosswalks, lighting, bike infrastructure, all that good stuff. Of course, that can come out piecemeal a little bit. And of course, funding is always a hurdle when implementing streetscape type of projects. But I think that this can be easily something that, maybe starts in the near future, and then that, can carry on forward as development comes through. You can have developers put in sidewalks with their businesses or redevelopments or outlot developments, all that stuff that you guys are really prime for that right now. The second overall priority that I pulled out was placemaking initiatives, and I put in parentheses, gathering space, review design committee, marketing and signage. I think I pulled out signage because that is kind of like, it's sort of like a hallmark of a traditional downtown, right? Because so you have, library this way, welcome to downtown Cascade, or whatever we end up calling it, or you end up calling it. So I think that that's, it's an important placemaking initiative so people have that sense of, oh, this is where I'm at, and this is that quaint, charming downtown that we look and feel that we really wanted. The review design committee I thought was a really interesting point, Michelle, and that made me jump back to the planning commission workshop that somebody specifically mentioned that as well as something that they were looking at, because there are quite a few strip centers that don't have a consistent look to them. And, how do we kind of, as the township as a whole, or as the DDA, or as the development area, or whatever the TIF area, how do we create that consistent vision among everything that comes in among all new developments or redevelopments? How do we get people up to code standards? How do we get them into compliance? And then how do we also work alongside developers so that we're offering good incentives for them, so that they're not, seeing it as too much of a hurdle and they don't want to come to Cascade. The third that I pull out is business attraction and retention efforts. In parentheses, I put remove barriers to development, but encourage quality design, address commercial and industrial vacancies, and encourage public-private partnerships. Of course, this can occur over a number of years, but it can start in the very beginning. Honestly, I've seen many communities will just send out a letter and they'll say, hey, we're looking for funding to do this specific project. And you'd honestly be surprised with how many people come back and they'll like interested businesses that, want to join in community efforts and things like that. It's just kind of like, allocating who does the work and how do we get it done and how do we organize it. And that was another thing that the Planning Commission also pulled out too, that now I'm kind of making connections of different groups that I'm working with here. But, removing barriers to development. How can we make it easier for developers to come through, but also provide them with the tools to say, hey, we would love for you to be here, but this is the look of what we want. And this is how we get there. Which I think that, I can't speak because I'm not for a developer because I'm not a developer, but I would like to think that, that maybe offers them a little bit of an easier time, that they don't have to like sit there and redesign and design, a project a million times to get things up to code, that you could just say, yep, this is our vision. This is exactly what we want. And you can build it for us. And then fourth, the overall priorities, I put strategic plan, or I put in parentheses a DDA or downtown plan for the DDA to use as a guideline for not only the short term, because that's more the purview of this strategic plan, but we're looking at short, mid, and long-term projects. Most DDA plans I see, the ones that are state compliant, usually span about 20 to 30 years. So that's something also that if you guys are operating under a current DDA plan or TIF plan, that may be something that you may want to look into in the near future of updating, because that can help put together your specific action-oriented projects, phase them out, tell you how much they'll cost pretty much, and then also identify different partners that can be pulled into the process. And then it'll also tell you, what's your financial stance looking like over the next, 30 years. So those are the four key priorities that I pulled out from this conversation. I don't know if anyone has any comments or if I'm missing something pertinent. I'm happy to add more than that, but I would say that maybe we'll probably try to cap it at 5 at the most, because we want to keep this condensed and workable and doable. So I appreciate you guys indulging in that. I do have another exercise, which admittedly you guys are going to be the guinea pigs for, because this is what we kind of similarly to what we have planned for the DDA focus group meeting. Because you guys have already gotten an overview of the survey results, Chris and I were kind of like, well, I don't want to just end this in 20 minutes and say, all right, thanks for your priorities, see you guys in a month or whatever. So what I have here is a map that I put together that basically is just an aerial map with parcel lines on it. And I want you guys and I brought markers to basically mark up on this map where you think Cascade's downtown is and why. So then I'll give you guys a couple minutes to go through that. Of course, this is not a test, so if you're struggling with it or don't have any ideas or something like that, we can talk through it. But I think that this could be a useful exercise too, so that way, when we do our focus groups and get all our information and we can say, oh, this is exactly what the DDA thought, or this is exactly the direction that we can get this consistent vision on. So I will hand out these maps.
So you want to know where we believe the where the village is, or the downtown is now, or where
Yep. So
we foresee it to be.
let's say that like if you were creating a Cascade and you were like, I'm creating downtown tomorrow or a village tomorrow. This is the boundary of where I would funnel all that money into, all the infrastructure into, all of my time and efforts of creating downtown. This is the boundary of where it would be located.
Okay.
So if we see one that's just right around Culver's, I'll take that one for the team.
Okay.
Do you want to mark or?
I'm sure I'll take it. Thanks. It's going to require us reading a map though, which makes it a little bit tricky.
Which now I'm looking at it.
No,
and,
that's good.
Road names did not print out as large as I would have hoped. So I apologize about that.
past are like amazing landmarks.
Yeah.
So.
How well do you know your community?
It is kind of hard, like, when you look at things.
She'll be back.
Oh. Like from an aerial perspective that you're like, what? Because when you're driving it, it just seems so different.
Sometimes, especially if you're pulling an old map,
Mhm.
right? Like I look at some of the Google maps, I'm like, this isn't there anymore, or this looks totally different.
I'm hoping that this is up to date. These are aerial images that I pulled from our GIS mapping software. So usually they do a fly, I think they just did a flyover in 2020.
Great.
So I'm hoping that they're pretty accurate.
You can see that. Once you see the river, then you kind of know where everything is.
Oh, did we have somebody?
I don't think.
Oh, we don't, okay. Just want to make sure that everyone has opportunity to participate.
I know.
Do these images look pretty up to date to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's good.
And can you guys see this, like that I'm seeing on the, like the camera that's over here?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, if I were to collect your guys and then if I put them here, you could see each other's.
You can zoom in on that also, Danielle.
Oh,
So,
you can.
yeah, it's That's can zoom in, right?
Nice.
Okay.
Where's the camera?
There's a camera, the document cameras right up in there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Every move is opposite, so it's kind of.
Yeah, you have to get used to it.
Does anyone know who owns those? It looks like there's 3 vacant lots if you start at the Ace Hardware. I think it's Ace.
Going around the bend there.
Yeah, do you guys know
Mhm.
who?
I could probably pull it up.
I believe Kingsland owns the one right next to them.
The thin one?
Yep, the thin one. And then I believe it's the same developer for those other two. I just can't think of who.
Looks like a duck.
Oh, that's actually, yeah.
5:30. Yeah, yeah, we got plenty of time.
looks like it has a really large growth that got added on. Noah's Pet Cemetery.
You're right. It's a big piece of land.
Mhm.
In a nice spot.
I'm gonna come this way a little bit because of the waterfront. The dock. Yeah, right.
If anyone's done, just let me know. I'm happy to collect them.
The park's already a park.
So those other two parcels are owned by LLW Investments.
So Kingsland does own that one.
The skinny one right next, yeah, adjacent to them, correct?
Power you have over there.
Good tools here.
Oh, are these the smelly ones?
Yeah,
Oh.
that was a smaller one. Does it
Yes,
smell
mine's
anymore?
smelly.
You remind me of like elementary school.
My daughter was complaining because she had the smelly ones, but someone next to her wanted to use them all the time because they were the smelly ones.
I remember the Milky pens were like all the rage when I was that like elementary age. That was like everybody wanted to have the gel Milky pens from Michael's, where it was like a whole wall of like.
You guys can help yourselves. I didn't know if we'd have time between this meeting and DDA. I just picked up some grapes and cheese and crackers. And
Thank you.
Scott brought some dessert. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was kind of you.
I was gonna say too, that I don't want you guys to like starving or anything, so we can always end at 5 a little early to give a half-hour buffer, whatever you guys need.
No, that's fine. Actually, can I change something on there? Just one little thing, sorry. Someone else is still working.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Give it back.
Sorry, can you not see yours very well, Michelle?
No, I can.
Okay.
If you have trouble seeing mine, because yellow didn't really show up.
Oh,
There-
darn it, I thought it would because it was layered.
No, that wasn't like throwing a knife at you for giving me yellow. It was just, if it's a hard time seeing it, just let me know if you need clarification.
It's mint.
Oh, man, that's what you got.
As a kid, my nose would always be like colors. I never sit there and smell over.
They smell so good, they don't taste good. Has anyone heard anything about Tuffy? I remember you or Ben, Sandra mentioned it a while ago that they had sent a letter about transferring the lease.
Yeah, they had, and then we responded to them. We needed some information. They went kind of silent for a while, crickets. He responded a few months ago, again, kind of asking the same thing. So we then said, hey, we need this information, crickets again, so.
Do you know who it's transferring, who they would want? Do you know if it's like just to the manager who's already?
No,
there?
it was to a different company. It was can't, I'd have to go back and look in the email. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but off the top of my head.
Alrighty, so we have everybody's maps. I was just gonna, I have these on the screen here, so we can just kind of go through them very quickly. But to me, it looks like everything that I've received back from you guys is pretty much consistent with one another. More or less, you know, give or take. Some areas that are designated are a little bit bigger than others. But we can just briefly go through these, and then what I can do is kind of take this and then calibrate all of those and then put it into one. So this first one here, if you can't see this blue area very well, it's this square right here, which has been labeled focus destination, which is along the riverfront. And this cluster development here where you see the large parking lots, and then the outer boundary here, which you can see in the orange. Michelle, did you want
Consistency is key.
to know anything on this or?
No, I mean, you know, as I was doing it, it was like, well, there's some real areas of concentration that I feel like we would want to see, but then the village itself does, you know, goes beyond that, right? There's all kinds of existing commercial properties that I think are part of the village itself.
That's a very good point. And forgive me, I am not well versed in your current boundary, but does this encompass like your current, like what you guys collect down for TIF and stuff? Just out of curiosity. It does.
The area you printed.
Pretty much. I mean, it's close to what was in the master plan and.
Yeah. Except we expand down to Patterson.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I knew it was a pretty big area, but I wasn't sure if it went this far.
Yes.
Next one. Pretty much very similar to our previous one that we just looked at, except the previous one had parcels to the south here that were encompassed. And then this one included this core area here and then along the riverfront, as you can see. Renee, did you?
Yeah, actually, I want to include those. I mean, I just mean the street. I'm just doing the
Oh,
street.
okay.
Yeah.
So you do want to
So,
include those?
yeah, I mean, just,
Okay.
yeah.
Those. Perfect.
And you can circle just below, I mean, that whole row.
To the
Like
south
where
here.
your place is.
Yeah,
Renee?
like that whole row. I just mean like the street in general, like that would be like the street.
Portobello Road.
Yes, like the street zone.
Mhm,
Yeah, all the way, I mean, all the way down to the river, you know, like,
mhm.
but those are the streets that I feel like should be.
Yeah, no, that's great. So then for our goal for traffic calming, reducing speed, improving walkability, you're thinking that this essentially loop here would be the best
Yeah.
place to target that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next one here is in the yellow that I had the oversight on not being a great color.
It actually shows up better on the screen.
Oh, yeah, it does better than what I'm looking at here. But as you can see, this is a larger boundary than the ones that we saw previously. So it goes all the way to the east over here, to the north of here, and then cuts off right up here. Scott, did you want to add any?
It goes a little bit further north, up near where yeah, right there. I think for me, I wanted to make sure that we included the library. That was, I think, a critical piece of kind of where people are going to gather. And I think it's going to be a critical piece of the puzzle if we're looking at traffic or what have you. I also look at kind of your big bulk areas where you have retail opportunity in the D&W complex, and also where Foaling is at. I mean, if you use those as your two kind of bookends of areas, if you have a lot of upside in those areas, and it's important to keep those areas thriving.
The bowling is over here somewhere, isn't it?
That white.
The white,
This one?
yeah,
Yeah.
that. And I think it's important from my point of view to include a little lead up to the bridge. Just a slight one,
That's what I
just
did
so that
too.
there's I kind of looked at this more as from a traffic standpoint and a development standpoint. I want someone to kind of enter into the village area. And just from past experiences in smaller towns and villages, there's kind of this lead into your village, welcome to, and then you get into the heart of the town or village. And there's usually just a very, the dam in that area is really the critical feature that signals this is Cascade. And then you have to include that whole area, in my point of view, as kind of that is our centerpiece. And then we build out around it with what our retail structures are.
All right, Grace, I think this one's yours.
That's where it's a little confusing.
Oh, no, not at all. So we're seeing similar theme here, incorporating this commercial center here with the large parking lots, which can offer great opportunity for development or infill development. This little triangle piece here, and then along the riverfront. Did you want to add any anecdotes? And then lastly, this one also looks very similar to the previous couple that we saw, incorporating this area here, this triangle development here, and then leading up to where the bridge area is here. Steve, did you want to add any?
The only thing, I guess I look at a village, and yes, it's got to be walkable and stuff that's going to be businesses that are going to be close to each other. And it may be the diner, it may be a coffee shop, bar, barber shop, whatever the case may be. And a lot of those elements are within that already, except where we have the big oasis of all that pavement, where Grace has kind of mentioned the chow hound and the foaling and so forth. And so, if, again, as we take a look at that short term, medium and long term, I guess that section of Cascade Road, whatever we're going to call it, the north section, would probably be the area that personally that I would focus on first and try to make that, all that there. Because again, on the other side of Cascade where Walgreens is, and then the businesses on Old 28th Street. I can see those eventually, they may eventually sell those businesses and they maybe become something else, other restaurants and so forth that people may be able to meander. But I think, as everybody said, it needs to include getting down to that riverfront. And so that people can walk down there and have something down there, which we have the park, but something down there that they can do, see, listen to, whatever the case may be. So even if the gathering space, as we continue to talk about, could be incorporated into the current park that's down there. The biggest issue, of course, is parking, but that's why I guess I drew the way that I did.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, is this the vet's office here?
Yes.
Okay. That's where my dog goes. She swallowed my nephew's pacifier and they saved her life with that, but
Did they have to operate?
yeah,
Oh,
it was a mess.
Well,
So-
Dr. Siegel is on our board, who's not here tonight.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I don't think I've ever worked with him before. I've been to their other location a few times, the
Oh,
one in
Brighton.
Brighton Village.
Yep.
But only this one, a couple, but yeah, she was like, I don't know, 6 months old or something like that. And my parents and like, I had a family thing for a weekend. She swallowed my nephew's pacifier, but we didn't know that she did. So she was like, just like losing weight, skin and bones. We couldn't figure it
oh,
out.
it was,
So we took her in to get ultrasound, couldn't find it, x-ray, couldn't find it for months. She was like throwing up, diarrhea, and this is all like a week before Christmas. And then we found out she got another ultrasound. And then we found it, like, I was like, of course you would swallow a literal plug. That just like.
Literally a
can't-
plug, yeah.
Like you can't digest. So anyway, they do great work there if you guys are in need of a vet. Okay, so thank you guys again for all of that, and talking through that. So as we were talking, I kind of started preliminary drawings of what this group, would collectively agree on to be the village area. But now I'm thinking of it, can you guys see that black marker, okay, or should I switch?
Not really.
Okay, I'll switch. Alright, so I included the triangle piece here that we talked about. And then, of course, this large swath here. And then along the riverfront here. And then I think that most people have incorporated this block here. And here. And then this is next door to the,
That's the vet.
That,
That
are
is-
they both vet buildings?
That's the Cascade Hospital for Animals there.
Mhm.
And then that parcel just to the
Oh. that's
south
the
or
day
east,
really.
that's the strip center.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So then I'm thinking, let's see, did anyone incorporate both of those? Okay. Some of them did. So I think that perhaps the northernmost boundary, we may want to include these two important businesses here. And then, what is this development here?
Those are apartments or,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It looked like there was almost like a baseball diamond or something.
Mm-hmm.
is that in the DDA?
it is not. No. Rick's business is the last business in the district.
I also, to Scott's point, I also see the value in incorporating the library and important civic buildings into where our downtown's gonna be located.
So I think the Jack Smith Road is, if you come in further right there, yeah, where you're at. I mean, if we were gonna pick the boundary,
The easternmost boundary?
Is it for what would it, like boundary for focusing on like pedestrian friendly areas or?
Yeah, so it would be like, this is where you guys would start kind of sinking assets and funding opportunities, and public and private partnerships to development or redevelopment or your streetscape improvement. So let's say if you have a gathering space in this area that folks can bike from the library to shopping downtown, we can safely do so.
Because we could take it to Thorn Hills maybe, but I don't know if that's getting a little too,
I think that does make sense, to be honest. And then it does, I know while it expands it to be a little bit larger, it does include that D&W. I mean, whether you cut it in half or not, I mean, that's the beginning of a downtown area.
Okay. So then this is all D&W here. Include this. This way. Include this northern swap there.
But at a minimum, I think we do need to include the library, because that is our most central point. We currently do have with also area to develop.
so Danielle, you just enclosed the Ace Hardware D&W area.
Mhm. Do we want to include that or no?
I mean, could we have an inner village and an outer village? Like, I mean, like, and focus on the inner village first and then
Like,
work
I
our
don't
way
think
out?
that would be a. Can we just
Yeah,
shake
I don't,
people down for
personally, I
money?
don't see that as being part of the village.
Me either.
I guess I see that end of 28th Street and Cascade Road personally. Again,
too.
just be in the central area that's kind of walkable. That
But for like planning purposes, like, I mean,
Yes.
we could do it inner and outer, just to like have a goal to like keep getting
Or like a-
bigger, you know, like, right?
Like that tree area that is next to Ace, there's 3 lots. That's kind of a nice buffer in my, I guess in my mind is
So
as it is now.
when, and Scott brought it up in terms of, you know, where you're entering. So there's kind of 3 points. One from, you know, coming in, heading westbound on Cascade Road. Before you get to the river. The other eastbound on Cascade Road, once you hit Cascade Animal for Hospitals. And then 28th Street, when Scott was talking about it, I was thinking, well, yeah, wouldn't we typically like put a sign there at sort of DNW at that intersection maybe that says, welcome to the village of Cascade, where DNW is, where the library is, you know, all of that sort of thing. So I was just thinking, where's a logical place to create that sort of entry, if you will? I don't know.
It used to be, history, it used to be right there at 28th and Old 28th Street where,
Yeah,
and then that sign blew over in a storm and we
Yeah.
just never replaced it, so.
And I think there's a positive friction here on it. I guess the key question is we have blue sky, so we can decide whether it's done in phases or what you prioritize. Those are all great questions, right? I think the core question we need to ask as a group is when we're sitting right now, this says Cascade on it. This is a central meeting place for our community at the moment. And this is a jigsaw piece that fits into an overall plan. We can choose and say this isn't part of the downtown village and it's walkable. Is there a corridor behind the scenes, like from Old 28th Street to get here? I mean, those are things, good discussions we can have, but I would argue right now, this is a pretty important asset into a piece in our puzzle of what the village is.
I wholeheartedly agree. But one thing that I'm thinking about as we talk about this, and maybe the answer is that, you know, we start small and then expand out.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're trying to, like, going from here to here, in my opinion, is not necessarily like a walkable distance. Like, let's say if I want to go to a restaurant here, but I want to go shopping over here, then I'm gonna have to go, you know, drop off my bags and maybe even move my car in the winter, stuff like that. So that's something else I'm kind of thinking through as we talk about this, of like, you know, issues of speed and traffic and all that aside, you know, where do we want to concentrate this to make sure that it is a walkable environment? Bikeable, sure, you can kind of expand that a little bit further. But if you think of, you know, most of the traditional downtowns that you know and love in Michigan, most of them, I would say technically, or tend to kind of concentrate along like a singular corridor or two, or, you know, maybe a block or two, if you think of, you know, Grand Haven or Saugatuck or all those different types of areas. Not saying that you guys are trying to be that, but I'm just saying popular
good
destinations.
examples, yeah.
I think it's kind of when you start to look at how you define gathering space versus village center a little bit, like
Right.
this is a very important gathering space.
Right, which those can be completely connected, but perhaps may not have to be the same thing.
Mhm.
I'm just tentative to say that, you know, that what's commonly known as the Prevost Center by Chowhound is going to be enough space if we're going to focus our effort into making that inclusive of the village. I like although I agree that, you know, some people might say it's not walkable to have it extend all the way to here. I just don't know that we're going to be able to achieve the functionality we want with making just that area our village.
Well,
So
I don't think it
I'm
would be-
in favor of expanding the boundaries rather than contracting them.
I also think about with DNW Center, the potential for developing that area into something that, and I think your point is well taken, but with planning, you can say, look, we want to concentrate, restaurants and dining kind of in this area, shopping in this area. I mean, I think about East Grand Rapids and it's pretty spread out. It's a spread out, that walk from Reed's Lake, where Roses, a very popular place is, all the way into town, people walk it all the time.
That's a good point.
So I think that, and what's not to say that we're promoting walkability, more walkability by expanding the area. There's sidewalks there. I mean, I see people walking on those sidewalks on 28th Street every day, the same people, different people, dogs, So I say go big or go home. Just like, let's start blue sky. And then if we have to pare back, okay.
Or
but-
you could say, this is our big area, but we're gonna concentrate here first.
That's why I said
And
there's
then-
those focus areas. That's why I was like, after I drew that big, I'm like, oh, but I think it can be planned that way.
And it's got to be connected to we have to take advantage of the riverfront as much as we can.
For sure.
No, that's a very good point. So then, I suppose circling back, do we want to include the D&W Ace Hardware complex in there? I mean, and who's to say too that, perhaps this isn't within the purview of the strategic plan because that's short term, but let's say if you guys do decide to embark on a development plan or a downtown plan that 20, 30, 40 years from now, that won't look like something different.
Right. It is a long game because because we're dealing with so many different private property holders. I mean, we're fooling ourselves if we say, well, this is what we want and we're going to do it in 5 years. I mean, there's no, I would love to be able to implement that, but there's no way we can.
Yeah, I see what you're
Go
saying,
through.
because I don't mean limit our options as far as this is what, like, if we can't be done or, but at the same
Not at
time, we
all.
just don't want to be so big, which you're not. I'm not saying this, that we water it down. So we're all agreeing. We're just I agree with you.
And I kind of look at it as holistically from a traffic approach. You want people to start slowing down a little bit as they're entering the
Mhm.
village. If you look at that as the outer fringe, the D&W, you're starting to slow down before you get to Jack Smith, right? Where you do have a high engagement of children. And then from there on, it
Right.
really, it starts ratcheting down, but then you have that piece, and how does that piece play into what we have on the north and south part of Cascade Road in that, what we could call the heart of the village. So it's kind of like, this is the roll into it. I would argue that, like, yeah, probably where we had that sign at Old 28th Street is kind of where that heart of the village starts. And then you have now this rolling kind of lead up to it. And then that protects the asset of where we're sitting right now, where you can still get great engagement of people on bikes and children walking. And this is where we hold our, on the 4th of July, we have police officers escorting people across the street. So I think it aids to all that.
And we oftentimes like to call those like gateway areas where, essentially you're looking at here is an important gateway, up here will be an important gateway, entering across the river there. So then that's when you're going to start kind of narrowing roads or designing roads to where you want people to kind of start slowing down. Or that's where your signage is going to be, whatever that ends up shaking out to say, welcome to, or what have you. But
And there is a ton of retail right across from DMW. There's where Sugar Mama's is, that building could use a facelift. Like, and then the one next to it where the new restaurant, the Electric Cheetah is, like, that building, it's at least it's got retail in it and it's got people,
is that this one here?
yeah, but the buildings themselves are kind of Sorry, I'm a little bit about,
Right
like, they need a
about
little
that.
love, right?
That's where the new car wash and cafe is going in as
Yeah.
well.
Right. Because isn't that what we want? It's retail. We want people to come to our community for a destination, right?
I see it though as not all retail. I feel like we need to have, you know, and using the word gathering space, I don't mean to imply the gathering space we're planning for here, but we need those pockets of places where people can, you know, in between their shopping, they can kind of plunk down and eat their ice cream, or they can,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
Like we've got that, what do you call the pocket park kitty corner from Tuffy? I don't know what you call it.
Museum Gardens Park.
there you
Yeah,
go.
great
Yeah.
space. And then right now it just isn't really get used because it's hard to get to, but
And I don't know how we solve that. I mean, and I brought up before the idea of a pedestrian bridge, which isn't feasible because again, you know, need a lot of space on the ends to do that, but.
I think that that's where a lot of your placemaking initiatives will kind of come into play. So you maybe have a public art campaign, or you have, you know, public-private partnerships to buy benches and, you know, buy a brick and all of these little things, or a veterans memorial, you know, a lot of things that you see kind of people like to relax and not necessarily a gathering space, but, you know,
Yeah, I
a
like the
hangout
benches.
space, sitting where people like to spend time.
Plus, I think there's a great opportunity with that bridge overlooking the dam that, you know, I've seen a lot of nature parks and also cities where they create, they build out the bridge maybe towards the dam, and you create a landing pad for people to enjoy.
Yeah.
And then they make it interactive with the water feature. And just, it's space that we don't have today, but that we potentially do have without having to purchase more land.
was it ever looked into that in front of the Thornapple River Drive in front of Tassel? Like, you know, where the diagonal parking spaces that are just parallel to the road? Or parallel parking along the road, just widening it when you guys were looking at the different Tuffy plans?
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
In front of Tassel Park? Is that
Yeah,
what
like
you're
where it
talking-
just kind of goes along the road, but there's parking on the side, either parallel or kind of at a diagonal.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because that is wider through there.
And it's park, so you could
Right, and
chip
I,
into
it
it.
seems like back in the day, maybe they used to have parking along that curb.
I don't remember it though as part of like either complete streets
I-
or the
right.
master plan either.
I agree.
That was not ever like embedded in either one of those things as a thought, you know.
Well, and I don't know, maybe there's a reason that it can't be done, but it
Could
just
be,
seems like,
I don't know.
or like East Grand Rapids, if the road commission, Ben, our manager, mentioned that they're talking about a turn lane east on Cascade Road, east of 36. And there were a bunch of residents that showed up and expressed concern, or, you know, wanting, because they have to get to the other side of the road to get to the pathway. So the road commission on its own came up with a, what do you call the thing? The pedestrian,
Crosswalk?
the thing that we've got in the middle of Cascade.
Oh,
Oh,
So
so
they,
island?
yep, like an island basically with kind of a crosswalk, and that would be literally in the middle of Cascade Road right now and east of 36. So that's kind of promising as far as throwing things in the middle of the road.
What did the road commission think about the roundabout? I've locked that out. Were they in favor, or were they one of the,
They said they were okay.
they were okay with it.
was that a resident opposition?
It was more, and believe it or not, it was more business opposition, certainly resident as well. But
I heard
a lot of the businesses right there at 28th and Cascade Road didn't like it because traffic wouldn't stop.
Ah.
And so they wouldn't stop and see, you know, what
Oh,
was
I think
in
I'll
there.
go into the dollar store. That's way back there.
Now, this was a few years ago. This was kind of early roundabout days in Grand
Yeah.
Rapids. So I think
Yes.
people were a little.
Well,
spooked
and
I think
about
we
that.
did have resident pushback. We had a
thank you.
gentleman
We did,
yes.
who attended and referenced that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yes, there were. I can't figure out how to drive. on it.
Right.
I sympathize, but I don't want to take that off the table as a traffic calming measure either.
It sounds like Kent County has been blamed, the road commission, as being a blockade, if you will, to being able to do something, but it sounds like they've got an open mind,
Mhm.
or they're willing to hear us out, is
Okay.
what I'm hearing. The door's cracked a little bit.
Hope so. And then we'll hopefully push it open and
I
lock
think
it
it's just the
open.
vision. We've got to sell, we got to sell the
Right.
vision
And why it's important.
and also back it up with the facts of the safety concerns that we've had incidents in
Yeah.
this area.
I will say that in my experiences, I find the Kent County Road Commission to be more open-minded than others, if that helps at all. Because there are a ton that are going in, especially in the city and all that, granted, it's a different environment than out here, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily, it can be done, point being, and they'll do it. But I think that, yeah, I agree, you have to have some sort of backbone in place for them to really take a look at it and agree that, you know, this is something that's viable to do.
And I think we have now, because of the community has responded in this survey, you can tell the story of this is a top priority. And in order for us to achieve a downtown area, which is another priority, we have to, we're going to do some traffic, I think, buffering to accomplish the goal. But you got to tell the story, and you're not going to make everyone happy. I think we just have to accept that reality.
Fair. There's nothing that anyone can do that will make 100% of people happy. There's always. gonna
Correct.
be
So
a
there's going to be
discontinuity.
blowback, but that's okay. It's what it is.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, since I brought up the roundabout, I mean, it could throw into question how the crosswalks would then work as well in connection with the roundabout. So we'd need to, think that forward so that, while it would certainly slow the traffic, it might cause confusion if there isn't a light about when people can get across the road. So.
Well, and maybe that's something that we can discuss through the strategic plan process is, hey, the road commission has agreed to come to this meeting, which we have confirmed that they will be there for our focus group. That, let's say a roundabout is in the works, maybe there can be some sort of like public outreach campaign of how to use these. And I don't know, just kind of spitballing here for ideas that we can, I'm thinking like in my hometown when I was younger, I was in high school when they put a roundabout by the high school, and we had to like actually take a class during school of how to use a roundabout. Which like, it really saved a lot of people because we had no idea how to use it. I was, 16 at the time, but I don't know, just maybe something like that of like, maybe the road commission can kind of help us out a little bit of getting the word out of why we do this and how to use it and all that
Like
good stuff.
PSAs for everybody.
Yeah.
Hey,
Right.
these are going in.
Or just resources
Everybody
online, yeah.
And if it is a roundabout, I would say there are roundabouts in Grand Rapids. We won't be the first. There's the
No.
one by
Right.
the Mary
No.
Free Bed. There's the one in Kentwood around their city halls and stuff. So it's doable
It's doable.
if that's the right.
I don't want to take the pedestrian bridge off the table either though, because they did that in my hometown on a very busy road to connect a biking trail with a lake. And I mean, we're talking about I think 40-45 mile-an-hour road and built the pedestrian bridge. The difference though was that it was not developed space. And so they didn't have the issues, but I feel like we just need to give it more thought.
It could be cool, like architecturally, like we could do a very, like we have money to spend, we could make a really pretty bridge, like make it be kind of a focal point, like how East Grand Rapids has that thing, but just, I mean, not that I love
The
it,
sail.
but like
We'll call
they
it
have a
the sail.
thing, right? But like it could be our thing, you know,
I'm
the
curious,
bridge.
remember, so in East Grand Rapids, this was a while ago now, but did that, I don't say redid their downtown, but was it with like CWD development? Like they just kind of, they just did such a nice job with I know those are all private buildings, but
And I don't know what arrangements they made with those.
Yeah, I don't
private,
know.
How to get the buy-in.
so the professional tools that are required that we can like work with businesses and enhance, but partner with them. In my mind, the most successful communities or the nicest communities, you may not even know where the government offices are.
He's kind of a master of public-private partnership,
Who?
the guy that runs CWD.
Yeah, so too bad he doesn't live in Cascade, but
He's open to that. You're talking about Sam Cummings
Yeah.
and Scott Weirdstrup. Those are the two guys with the DeVos a family member who is kind of the silent individual who's involved. That's where the CWD comes from.
And we've got some DeVos presence in Cascade residents. I mean, I think they would probably be willing to have a conversation to share some of their knowledge with us. They may want not, agree to volunteer to do it all, but
They're pretty engaged in the community.
They
I
are.
see them at a lot of key events where they care. So I think if it isn't them, there's another group that I think we could use some expertise on.
And I think Meyer too, Meyer has a lot of grant opportunities as well, like even just speaking aside.
And they're resident, he's a resident of Cascade too.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and their flagship store. I think, is in
They are.
Cascade. So there are definitely many opportunities there. It's just kind of, how do we get those people around the table? Who's gonna reach out to them? How do we organize this? And maybe it's just as simple as a call and say, hey, will you come to our meeting so we can talk about our plans with you? And we would love to have some sort of conversation there, not that we're asking you to empty out your pockets, but we're asking how do we accomplish our goals? What have you done in other communities? Like that.
I think that's a great idea. But I agree that I think we want to be cohesive when we're talking about the redevelopment of the village, the broader village area, so that we're not, we might phase out the work, but we want to be sure that we're looking at the whole thing.
Yeah, and there's many statewide opportunities too, through the MEDC, other opportunities that you guys can look into to see where those options are. And what's also interesting about East Grand Rapids too is that I feel like, just geographically speaking, they're just quite a bit smaller, so it was probably easier for them to funnel in and focus on a specific area. And I would say that they don't have as many nuances, I suppose, of the rural large lot subs over here and, industrial, so there, it's a great model, absolutely, of what can be done as far as public-private partnerships go, but, to exactly follow it would be a little bit difficult, I think, in Cascade.
Well, and when we get to fundraising, we dipped a tiny toe into this back when we started talking about the community gathering space. I'm gonna switch hats. I'm also on the board of the Cascade Community Foundation. And we had a conversation with the executive director about raising funds through fundraising for the community gathering space. So there may be those ways to solicit private donations from residents who are interested in these projects through that kind of mechanism as well.
Totally.
Switch back hats now.
Yep, and I know you guys have a PR team that you work with and all that good stuff, so there are definitely opportunities there. Which, all ties back into the importance of having a plan. And prioritizing what needs to be done first and all of that. It is almost 5 o'clock, and I just want to be mindful of everybody's time. Did you want to end at 5 so you have a half-hour buffer for your meeting, or do you want to keep going? Either way, up to the group.
I'm flexible. I just need probably like a 5-minute break.
Right, we need to eat the things, but
Unless-
that won't take more than 30
Give you another
seconds.
20.
Yeah, we can go for a little bit. Let's say 5:15. Give everybody enough
May I
time
take just a
to,
quick break
yeah.
for like 2 minutes? Keep going.
Grace asked earlier about, the Tuffy muffler property. Has there ever been conversation with Verbergs?
We have had conversations with the Verbergs. He was not opposed to relocating. He wants to keep his business open for his employees.
Yeah.
He was looking for a space. He was actually talking to motion picture makers that burnt to the ground. About maybe relocating up there. It's a money thing.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
but yes,
but he was open to.
He's
'cause
open,
I
he's not
didn't even know
opposed
that.
to, right,
Okay,
it's just, he wants to make sure he stays open for his
right.
employees.
No, that's promising. I didn't even know that he was open to relocation.
And other property owners have been in those conversations as well along the river. Some more willing than others.
Right.
You mean the houses or?
businesses and residences. I don't know that residences recently.
Yeah, residents.
No, I mean, the last one would be that, the doctor's office. And that wasn't a residence, that was an office.
We put the one down below.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
Oh,
did
the one that
purchase
the
that.
township already owns now?
Yeah, but I mean, the
Behind Tuck.
conversation before.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah, at the bottom there.
Yeah, we've already got that.
But we had conversations a couple years ago about trying to purchase some of the businesses next to Verberg's, like that, whatever it
Yeah,
was.
Village Bike Shop
Yeah,
and the,
right. And it was a gallery.
art gallery, yeah, the
Yeah.
Cascade Gallery.
Could, this is probably just very self-serving for me, but could we have a map that show like this, that shows what properties the township already owns?
I do have that map. Yep, I can send that out to you.
Sandra,
I've seen
did you do a
lists,
map?
but I don't.
And I started one, but I'm pretty much
Okay.
in agreement.
I'm
Yes,
sorry, I apologize. I
okay.
keep skipping over you.
no problem.
Are those apartments that are behind Culver's and McIntyre Bank, are those in the downtown development?
They are.
district?
So one, there's a couple of gaps here too that I want to make sure that I have clarity on before we move forward. Is this swath here? I think this is this Nodos? And
Nodos owns that, but Nodos is the parcel just to the right.
it's on here.
Yep,
Okay. And then these two businesses here, and then it looks like there's quite a few businesses up here too, which it looks like many people included there. Those in there. It looks like, I was looking at Google over here. There's a pizza.
JT's.
JT's is back on Old 28th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is that
And the
JT's?
Chinese restaurant.
Okay.
Port
Yeah.
Barlow.
It looks like, this is Tudor Time here.
yes.
Yep.
First Walk Chinese.
No. JT.
JT's.
That'd be
Oh, sorry, thank you,
JT's.
and Chinese.
And then First Walk is next.
God, I'm terrible with maps.
So I guess the question is, do we want to include these three businesses here and these here?
I think we certainly want to include the Nodos property. I mean, we, you know, if for no other reason than to be kind of mindful that they'll be affected by, you know, what's happening on this library property, because some of the prior conversations have involved, you know, perhaps building recreation space that abuts to that property. So I think including it makes sense for that reason.
I think it's possible too, they have a lot of weddings, events there that people may, if they're making a weekend out of it. may
I
want
think
to
there's some
stay in
good
a hotel
potential.
and-
Yeah.
I think it's in the corridor, or whether it's the leading into the village or not. I mean, it's there. It looks like, wow, we're expanding it significantly, but they're on 28th Street right there.
Right. And I guess I would agree for that same reason to just carry that forward through the other businesses on Old 28th.
Okay. Is this vacant? Oh, no. the library's
That's the library. There's like a taekwondo or some other
Right.
martial arts place
Yeah.
back there.
Yeah, there's
And
the-
a lice removal place, which sadly I've.
Oh, yeah,
visited.
it's so secretive because no one wants to talk about it.
Everyone's kids get it, but no one can talk
I mean,
about it.
there's the gunsmith is back there too.
They have a specific business for lice removal?
There are several, as a matter of fact.
I've never heard of that.
It is magical.
Way
and
too cheap to take a kid there. I can't imagine.
Recommend, highly recommend. Yeah,
Do they like delouse like people or like
People,
things
yeah.
like sheets
people,
and-
like you take your
Oh.
lousy child there and they,
They're the only
Drop 'em
business
off,
that won't have a
things.
big sign. You quietly
remedy.
usher your
lice
kid in through the
removal.
back
That's
door.
right.
It's like a speakeasy for lice.
It is well worth knowing about if you've ever
You,
had a child.
you
if you've had
don't
to
know it's a
delouse.
thing until you have a child who has lice.
Boy, somebody saw a great
It's,
opportunity.
I'm telling you, well, there, before they moved in, I had to take my kids to a place out on like Plainfield because they had a different business out there. So I was very pleased when one moved into Cascade. Haven't had to use it for a couple of years, so we're gonna knock on wood.
Yeah, I'll knock on wood.
My kids are out of grade school now, so I hope we're past that.
All it takes is the pandemic to keep the lice population down,
No
right?
kidding. I wonder where they're all at now.
It's been a
Oh, they're
bad year
there.
for louse.
Just wait.
Huh. I have
So
no
can I
idea.
ask a question? So as we identify this village area, and knowing that the community has shared that a designated village is a priority from the strategic standpoint. What's the purpose? What's the benefit?
Of having the village.
Yes.
So I think that there are multiple benefits of that. Number one, economic development. Having businesses come in, business attraction, business retention, not necessarily even commercial businesses, but, you know, places where people work, entertainment, you know, public art, things like that. Number two, I think that creating spaces like that in place, making initiatives is also a way to address inclusivity and equity within communities as well, to offer space for everybody, to offer, I don't know, places where people feel comfortable and where they feel welcome and, you know, where they want to live, where they want to move, where they want to stay. So from a business attraction standpoint, economic development, residents moving in, staying, want to stay in here. And then that kind of goes into, you know, additional residential development, perhaps if there's a time and a place for that, things like that. You know, increasing the tax base, which then you can offer additional amenities to the township as a whole, be it through infrastructure or internet, cable, all of that good stuff, roads, bridges, things like that. And I also think that in many ways, communities that offer those types of amenities for residents, like those just tend to end up being desirable communities by and large. Especially that Cascade, I think, is perfectly positioned to where you have the opportunity to offer development like that, of that type, increase your economic tax base, increase your economic development, but you can still offer people country living in some ways that they also like to do too. So I think that, you know, from a regional destination standpoint too, that also would be really beneficial. I don't know if that kind of answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, no, it does. I just, you know, I guess as we have this conversation and we keep on, I mean, it seemed like in the past or anytime anybody ever talked about the village, in my mind, again, my eyesight went down to the, I guess, the Prevost Center along Cascade to the river, that corridor. And as you kind of addressed, usually a village, a downtown, whatever the case may be on a singular road, or there may be a T where you may have businesses on both. And I understand the aspect of, yep, the library is their center right now. It's kind of like a centerpiece for the community. And that should be in the village. And so we're kind of creating the village around the library instead of taking a look at what makes best sense of where geographically that walkability and or those things that we were talking about, where does that make best sense? So I'm not trying to poo-poo any of our conversation that we've had, but it just seems like, okay, we're kind of right back where we're currently at. You know, nothing's really, I mean, to where it's going down 28th Street. Eventually we'll, you know, could get down past the next shopping center. But
So do you feel like through this conversation, you still don't feel confident that we have a consistent, tangible vision of where are we going to sink in and where do we want to focus our assets and our resources?
yes,
Am I reading that correctly?
I would say that.
Okay.
I would say that. Again, I can just personally, again, I see a lot of, I can see it being more realistic for us as a community at this moment in time, as we deal with all the private businesses, private property and so forth. Yeah. I guess, and maybe I'm just thinking more short term than the long term. That Prevo Center in that area down there is, to me, again, I just envision, I see a stage down there to where there could be music, as you know, we're talking about benches around, people are getting ice cream, they are meandering in that area. There's restaurants that they're visiting. Maybe that property isn't that big for this vision that I got in my head, which I don't think it is, but you know, I don't see people using that walkability and coming up here to the library, or that walkability and going up to D&W. That's, again, I'm not trying to
I agree.
smash that down, but I just
So I think that perhaps the answer is a hybrid of all of those things. And, you know, like, so for example, we have a library here. It's a great asset. Maybe the answer is, what can we do in the here and now that we have with this library now within the strategic plan that's 1 to 5 year purview of perhaps this is where our gathering space goes. This is where we want to sink in our resources into creating that as number 1. And then from that point, perhaps the next step would be, let's create a downtown plan. And that will kind of show this entirety, this boundary, and what a build out of that may look like in the future. And then it'll break out, this is your phase, this is next phase, this is your next phase, this is your next phase. So where if this conversation is like, you know, we're thinking big, but you know, we also need, I see your point, we need to narrow it down a little bit smaller, because this is a strategic plan and you do need direction for the next 1 to 5 years. So what does that look like? And I think that oftentimes it's not only creating that pie in the sky vision, but it's also the low hanging fruit at the same time. And that low hanging fruit is going to be, okay, number 1, gathering space. Where's that going to go? Well, we have our library, we have events here. Why not put a theater, or, you know, steps, or more benches, or walking paths, or whatever that case may be. And then, you know, from that point you say, okay, well, because we have our gathering space here, now let's turn to our parks folks and say, okay, let's prioritize a trail to connect here to here, or, you know, whatever. And then I think though that having that, you know, town center village kind of vibe in this area, maybe something that is sort of speaking to that low hanging fruit bit a little bit of the development's already there.
No, that's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
That's like, if you can
Right.
pull this off, you get planning the firm of the year. I mean, this is awesome.
But I think,
But your concept
But
is
you're
right
right.
on, that it's, you know, this area is.
I'm not
the
saying
low-
don't do it. I'm saying like,
low-hanging fruit
yeah,
Area, but
just
that
take skills.
Yeah.
the Prevo Center
It's the big
is,
project.
Yeah.
is the big project with the most potential.
And that's what Chris was talking about. Like, he
Visual
wasn't
change.
intimidated by it. It's just, this is a more complex project, but
Right.
that's what he went to school for. So
but I take that full step back and I think like, are we limiting our success? I feel like we're horses with blinders on, because if you were to take this map and push it out by 2 or 3 miles, you're going to see a cluster of homes to the south of the library that's a huge feeder. I think of a downtown village has multiple inputs coming in. You're going to have cars that come in from the outside and you need to park. You have families coming down from the Church from the Hill in a high density area of a cluster of homes, walking down to get ice cream. You've got people coming off of Thorn Apple Drive from all those developments back there, feeding into the thing. And I just make sure we're holistically looking at it. Are we limiting ourselves based upon what we think are we've placed limitations on ourselves financially and other things?
oh,
Or why are we constraining ourselves? Let's look at where the communities, where the clusters of homes are, how that feeds in, the assets that we have, and then work through what the roadblocks are.
but we're the DDA, right? So we've got this like, we've got a planning commission. We can look at land use zoning, you know, master plan, but then within it takes a focus to actually get some, I mean, everyone's kind of can stay in their lane. The DDA's got a great potential to make a great kind of
Right.
area.
Right.
So it's not that I want to ignore it. It's just that,
But I challenge you even on that as the supervisor, because you sit on the township board. So it's going to take a DDA group, a township group, and public and private entities.
that's what we're
to
doing with the
pull off
strategic
what this-
plan.
What
Yeah.
this is.
So for example,
So
the bridge
we're-
is outside of the DDA over the Thornapple, but it's a huge, huge community priority.
I actually put it on my map.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
never been, but funding wise, it's outside of the DDA district, so
I know.
I don't think we can even
But
spend
that's
money
one
on
of
it.
those things where I think if we don't think about these, so I agree with you, this focus of the Prevo Center and creating that place, right? Talk about placemaking, but there's all these tentacles that attach to it.
Mhm.
That if we don't do something about, that won't be successful. We'll never be able to get people there in an easy way that it truly is a walkable community and it's safe and we manage the traffic. And so I think that's why we're pushing the boundaries out to take into consideration all of those other things that help us get there
But if you
to
say
that
the-
thing that we all really want, it seems.
The DDA has the big bat of saying, okay, we will throw a lot more financial resources at that Provo area, right? Because we'll do a great job of developing it, say we're doing that, right? It's gonna take other pieces of that jigsaw then, to your point, a successful plan is 360 degrees feeding into that. It doesn't mean like we're gonna throw everything in the kitchen sink at D&W, but there's like an enter into the village, and it may just mean a couple signs and a little thought work through with the road commission. But the real, like, the heavy lifting and the development's gonna happen in that sweet spot we're all talking about. We might be finding as a group, we're all saying something very similar. There's just nuances to get us into that master plan.
Like maybe we need to leverage that D&W center property somehow to get somebody that's in that Prevo Center area. That is totally hypothetical, right? But to say, hey, we've got a better spot for you. And here's why, or
No, I agree with you
agree.
there. Yeah,
Having
yeah,
those kinds of
totally.
tools in the toolkit.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. We just have to find ways to incentivize the private
Right.
owners to
yeah.
play ball.
And different tools, different areas get different
But
attention.
I think we start with what is ideal and what do we want? And then list out what are our obstacles of obtaining it. There's only so much as a DDA group we can do within our governance, right?
Right.
That is a constraint in reality. But we still have, Grace, we've got you on the board with the township to connect the two groups together.
And the planning commission.
In the planning commission,
Yeah.
that's why you're sitting here. And to
Zoning.
allow it to be this hub to allow us to pull things together.
Yeah, I think we're kind of, yeah, I get it. It's just like how we're looking at it.
I always hate when people put constraints on themselves when we're still in blue sky.
Yeah.
And this is gonna set the success of this township and this area and the DDA for the next 20 years.
So when is the focus group meeting on the village? That is already scheduled, correct?
Yeah, Thursday.
Thursday the 24th,
Yeah.
6 to 7:30 here.
Alrighty.
And I also may add to this conversation, now I'm also thinking through this, that when I mentioned like the low hanging fruit for this area here, what I mean by that is that the infrastructure is already in place. And there, you already have businesses, you already have development there, and it would just be kind of a matter of what does that build out look like? And working with designers and architects and engineers to say, okay, here's our existing plot of parking lot, and what can that look like? And how do we fill this out? And, connecting into these areas over here, where it may not necessarily be where you're continuing that traditional downtown feel all the way down 28th Street, but you are, implementing, let's say, streetlights, like banners, and kind of those placemaking initiatives or public art, to where it's not necessarily like this entire area is your village, but it's a part of a whole. if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, but to your point, Steve, that I think that, you know, it is important to be able to look at the trees through the forest a little bit here, because we are talking short term, and what does that look like? And I think that finding, you know, identifying those several projects such as making a development plan or making a downtown plan, making a DDA and TID plan, perhaps finding a marketing company, things like that that you can do tomorrow that are going to be key to basically setting you up to achieve this.
Are you doing the same exercise with the other boards or the other commissions too?
Kind of, not necessarily related to this specifically.
Okay.
So this exercise will be part of our program for the focus group on the 24th.
Gotcha.
But the other groups, we'll go through the priority list and things like that. With planning commission, I basically just did an overview of the survey results and then did the priority exercise and kind of talked through that a bit. And then Chris is translating that into goals and objectives for each group. And then, you know, which the advisory committee will be seeing here soon.
But I think Steve brought up a great point of, by doing this, what do we get? And so making sure that we have defined objectives or goals that we want to achieve, because you can spend millions of dollars, right? That's easy to do. Being able to tie those millions of dollars towards like deliverables that are going to benefit the community both financially, and then there's some just aesthetically, like people want to live here because of these, and those are hard to quantify versus others, but it plays into a broader
Yeah.
plan.
And you guys have the advantage because people already really want to live here.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, you know, you're taking what you already have and you're enhancing it.
Yeah, like don't screw it up.
No pressure. All right, guys, we have to bring this, it's 25 after, so we have our DDA meeting that starts in 5 minutes. But I'd encourage all of us to try to come to the focus group meeting for the village to continue this conversation.
Yes.
I don't know if you have signups for that yet. So we have a gauge on how many people might be attending that, or is it still too early to figure that
That's
out?
a great point.
Or
What
do
I
people not sign up? Do you just show up? I mean,
We were planning to have it more of like open house format.
Okay.
But now that you mention it, perhaps a better approach would be to put up a Survey Monkey essentially and link that to the website and just say, you know, give us your name and number of attendees or whatever, if you're planning on attending, just so we can get an idea. Especially because I'll have a number of maps to print out, because what the plan is that we want to separate everybody into small little
Okay.
focus groups to work on this map,
okay.
pretty much.
Final questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, Danielle, thanks a
Yes,
ton.
no problem. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm around anytime if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns.